The crystal champagne flute felt cold and fragile in my hand, a stark contrast to the heat rising in my chest. Across the polished mahogany table, my future mother-in-law, Beverly, smiled a smile that never reached her eyes. It was a predator's smile, all teeth and veiled condescension. We were at a private dining room in Aurelia, a restaurant so exclusive you couldn't find it on a map, only through a referral. It was her choice, of course. Everything was always on her terms. This dinner was meant to celebrate my engagement to her daughter, Gabrielle, the love of my life. But I knew Beverly. This wasn't a celebration. It was an arena, and she was the only one armed. "Marcus, darling," she began, her voice dripping with saccharine poison that coated the air. She set her fork down with a delicate tink against the porcelain. "We are all so thrilled about you and Gabrielle. Truly." She glanced around the table at her husband, Robert, a man whose spine had been replaced by a dollar sign years ago, and her son, Julian, a pale imitation of his mother's arrogance. Gabrielle, my Gabby, shifted uncomfortably beside me, her hand finding mine under the table. Her grip was tight, desperate. She knew what was coming. Beverly leaned forward, the diamonds on her ears catching the soft light. "But you must understand, a mother has concerns. Gabrielle is our most precious asset. We've invested everything in her. The best schools, the right social circles. Her future, and by extension our family's legacy, is paramount." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "And you, Marcus, you're a bit of an enigma." I met her gaze, my expression carefully neutral. I had spent 3 years mastering this look. It was a mask of polite indifference that infuriated her more than any argument could. "I'm not sure I understand, Beverly," I said, my voice even. "Oh, I think you do," she purred. "You're a freelance data analyst. You live in a modest apartment. You drive a sensible car. All very humble. And while there's a certain nobility in simplicity," she said the word simplicity as if it were a communicable disease, "it doesn't exactly scream provider or security. We know nothing about your family, your history, your finances. For all we know, you could be riddled with debt. You could have a past." Robert chuckled, a dry, reedy sound. "Beverly is just saying we need to do our due diligence, son. Standard procedure." "So," Beverly delivered her killing blow, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "To put all our minds at ease, before any wedding plans proceed, we will be commissioning a full, comprehensive background check. Financials, family history, criminal record, the works. I trust you have no objection." The silence was a physical thing. Gabby's breath hitched. Julian smirked into his napkin. Beverly's gaze was locked on me, challenging me to refuse, to give her the ammunition she needed to paint me as deceptive and unworthy. She thought she had me trapped. She thought she was about to expose the simple, unimpressive man she'd always believed me to be. What she didn't know was that she hadn't just set a trap for me. She had just walked, head held high, into mine. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our stories. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Are you in Atlanta, Houston, London, or maybe Lagos? I love seeing our global community. Now let's get back to Marcus and see how this unfolds. I let the silence stretch for a moment longer, feeling the weight of their collective expectation. Gabby squeezed my hand so hard I thought she might break my fingers. I gave her a reassuring squeeze back, a silent promise that I had this under control. I then turned my full attention to Beverly. "An objection?" I finally said, allowing a small, calm smile to touch my lips. "Of course not, Beverly. I think that's a fantastic idea." The surprise on her face was fleeting, but delicious. She had expected a fight, a protest, a flustered display of indignation. My easy agreement threw her off her rhythm. "Fantastic," she repeated, recovering quickly. "Well, I'm glad you're being so cooperative." Why wouldn't I be? I replied, taking a slow sip of my water. Transparency is the foundation of any strong relationship, whether it's in business or in family. I want you to feel completely comfortable. In fact, I insist. Please spare no expense. Use the best firm you can find. I want you to have every piece of information you need to feel secure about my joining your family. Gabby looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and relief. Robert and Julian exchanged a look of smug satisfaction. They saw my compliance as weakness, the capitulation of a man with nothing to hide because he had nothing at all. Beverly's smile finally became genuine. She had won, or so she thought. "Excellent," she declared, clapping her hands together softly. "I'll make the arrangements tomorrow. I use a firm called Thorne Investigations. They are the best in the business. Discretion and thoroughness are their hallmarks. They found out everything about Julian's ex-fiancée, right down to her overdue library books." Julian shuddered at the memory. "They're surgical, Marcus. You've been warned." "Thorne Investigations," I repeated, nodding thoughtfully as I filed the name away. "Sounds impressive. I look forward to seeing their report." The rest of the dinner was a masterclass in condescension. Beverly and Robert spoke at length about their upcoming trip to Monaco, the new wing they were adding to their country club, and Julian's recent, and in their eyes, monumental, promotion to senior vice president at Sterling Financial Group. They spoke about a world of wealth and influence, punctuating every sentence with subtle digs at my perceived station. They asked me about my little projects, if my freelance work was steady, and if I was contributing my fair share to the apartment I shared with Gabby. I answered each question with unwavering politeness. "The work is very engaging, thank you. We manage just fine. I'm sure you mean well." Each calm response was a stone dropped into the placid surface of their arrogance, creating ripples of irritation. They wanted me to be cowed, defensive, angry. My refusal to give them that satisfaction was my own quiet rebellion. For 3 years, I had endured these dinners, these family gatherings that felt more like interrogations. I had listened as they belittled my life's work, a life I had carefully constructed and concealed for reasons they could never comprehend. I thought back to the beginning, to why I had created this facade in the first place. 5 years ago, I had ended a serious relationship with a woman I thought I loved. The moment she found out the true scale of my wealth, she changed. Her eyes, which had once looked at me with affection, now looked at me with calculation. Every conversation became about access, about what my money could do for her family, for her friends. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a resource. The heartbreak was profound. It taught me a bitter lesson. Extreme wealth is a distorting lens. It changes how people see you, and it can be impossible to know if they value you or your valuation. So, I made a decision. I created a new life. Marcus Vance, freelance data analyst. I kept my legal name, Marcus Thorne, for official business, but went by my mother's maiden name, Vance, in my personal life. I bought a simple but tasteful apartment in a nondescript building. I traded my custom sports car for a reliable sedan. I wore well-made but unbranded clothing. My watch was a classic, elegant piece, but its 5-figure price tag was only recognizable to a true connoisseur, a category Beverly and her family, for all their talk of luxury, did not fall into. They were impressed by loud labels, not quiet quality. I wanted to find someone who would fall in love with Marcus Vance, the man, not the balance sheet. And then I met Gabrielle. She was brilliant, passionate, and funny, an art curator with an eye for beauty in overlooked places. She saw me. She loved my quiet nature, my supposed simplicity. She didn't care that I wasn't a titan of industry. Our love felt real, pure, untainted by the gravity of wealth. I had planned to tell her the truth before we got married, of course. I just needed to be sure. But her family, They were the ultimate test. Their immediate and sustained disdain for me was more revealing than any private investigator's report. They judged the book by its very plain, unassuming cover, and in doing so, they showed me exactly who they were. Beverly's demand for a background check wasn't an insult. It was an opportunity. The final piece of a puzzle I had been assembling for 3 years. It was time for them to read the book. All of it. As the waiter cleared our dessert plates, I excused myself. In the hushed, marble-clad hallway, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang once. "David," I said. "Marcus," came the familiar voice of my lawyer, my COO, and my best friend, David Chen. "How was the execution? Or should I say, the dinner?" "The guillotine has been requested," I said, a hint of grim satisfaction in my voice. "Beverly wants a full background check." David whistled softly. "She actually did it. I owe you $200. So it's time." "It's time," I confirmed. "She's using a firm called Thorne Investigations." I could hear the smile in David's voice. "Oh, that is rich. Poetic, even. Does she have any idea?" "Not a clue," I said. "She thinks she's hiring the best. Let her. I want you to open the gates. Give them everything. The unsealed Aegis incorporation documents, the full asset portfolio, the property deeds, the holding company structures. All of it. I want this report to be so heavy with the truth it breaks her mahogany table." "Consider it done," David said. "We'll route their primary requests through our internal servers. They'll get a fire hose of verified, undeniable data. This is going to be the most comprehensive and most expensive report they've ever compiled. And the best part is, you'll be paying for it." "Let's call it a wedding gift," I said, looking at my reflection in a gilded mirror. The man looking back was quiet, unassuming, but his eyes held a fire they couldn't see. A gift for my mother-in-law. The week that followed was a slow, simmering torture for Gabby and a victory lap for Beverly. My fiancée was a wreck. She apologized to me a dozen times a day. "I'm so sorry, Marcus," she'd say, her face buried in my chest. "My mother is... she's impossible. This is humiliating. We should just elope." "No," I'd tell her gently, stroking her hair. "We're not running. It's okay, Gabby. Let her do it. We have nothing to hide." My words were true, just not in the way she understood them. I was counting on her mother's arrogance, on her absolute certainty that she was right. Beverly, meanwhile, was insufferable. She'd call Gabby and I'd hear the one-sided conversation, her mother's voice a smug drone on the other end. "Just a few more days, darling. The preliminary findings are very interesting. We'll have a family chat once the full report is in. It's all for your own good." She was baiting me, trying to make me sweat. She even sent a text directly to me, a picture of the Thorne Investigations headquarters in a sleek glass tower, with the caption, "The truth is coming." I simply replied, looking forward to it. What Beverly didn't know was that I owned that building. Finally, the day arrived. Beverly summoned us to their palatial home in Buckhead for a family meeting that Sunday afternoon. The air in the car on the way over was thick with dread. Gabby was twisting a tissue in her hands, her leg bouncing nervously. "Whatever it says, Marcus, it doesn't matter to me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "If she says one horrible thing, I swear, we're leaving." "It's going to be okay," I promised, placing a hand on her knee. I was carrying a slim black leather briefcase. She eyed it curiously. "What's in there?" "Just some work," I lied smoothly. "Some data I need to review later." In reality, it contained my own copy of the report, along with several other key documents. I was coming to this meeting prepared not for a defense, but for a demolition. Beverly's home was an exercise in ostentatious wealth, soaring ceilings, abstract art that was more expensive than expressive, and enough white marble to reconstruct a Roman temple. We were led into the grand living room, where the whole family was assembled. Beverly sat on a cream-colored sofa like a queen holding court. Robert stood by the fireplace, a glass of scotch in his hand. Julian was perched on an uncomfortable-looking chair, practically vibrating with anticipation. On the glass coffee table between them and us sat a thick, spiral-bound document, nearly 2 inches thick. The cover bore the elegant, intimidating logo of Thorn Investigations. If you're already seeing where this is going, hit that like button right now. And comment below. What do you think Marcus should do? Should they reveal the truth or keep watching? Let me know your prediction. Now, what happens next changes everything. Marcus, Gabrielle. So glad you could make it, Beverly said, her voice dripping with false cordiality. Please sit. We sat on the opposing sofa, the coffee table a veritable no-man's land between us. The report was the centerpiece, a bomb waiting to detonate. As you know, Beverly began, picking up the report with a theatrical flourish. I commissioned this inquiry for Gabrielle's protection. I am a mother first, and it is my duty to ensure she is making a sound decision. She patted the cover. And now, we have the truth. Let's go through it together, shall we? Gabby tensed beside me, ready for the onslaught. I, however, leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, the picture of relaxation. My calm seemed to unnerve Beverly more than anything. She opened the report. Let's start with the basics. Name, Marcus Alistair Thorn. She paused, her brow furrowing slightly. Thorn? Is that a coincidence? Your name is Vance. Vance is my mother's maiden name, I supplied calmly. I use it personally. Thorn is my legal surname. I see, she said, though her expression said she found it suspicious. Age, 35. Born in Atlanta, Georgia. No criminal record. Clean. So far, so boring. Julian snickered. She turned the page. Education. Here we go. MIT, Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, and another in Applied Mathematics. Graduated summa cum laude. The room went quiet. Julian's smirk vanished. Robert lowered his scotch glass. Beverly's reading slowed. This wasn't the community college transcript she had been expecting. Well, she said, recovering, a good education is important, but it doesn't guarantee success. Plenty of smart people end up as failures. She flipped another page with more force than necessary. Employment history. Lists here. Freelance data analyst, 2018 to present. Minimal declared income, consistent with a modest lifestyle. She looked up at me, her confidence returning. See? This is what I was concerned about. All that education, and for what? To scrape by on small projects. Keep reading, Beverly, I said softly. Her eyes narrowed before returning to the page. She read the next line silently first, her lips moving without sound. Then her eyes widened. She blinked, twice, as if to clear them. She looked up at me, then back at the page, then read the line aloud in a strained whisper. Also listed. Founder, Chairman, and CEO, Aegis Analytics, 2012 to present. Robert stepped forward. Aegis, the data security firm? That's one of the biggest private tech companies in the world. It must be a mistake, Julian stammered. A different Marcus Thorn. Beverly was frantically flipping pages, her manicured fingers fumbling with the paper. She skipped ahead to the financial section. Her face, which had been smug and rosy, began to drain of all color. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. What is it, Mom? Julian asked, getting up and walking over to look over her shoulder. His jaw went slack. Let me help, I said, leaning forward and opening my own briefcase. I pulled out an identical report and opened it to the summary page. I believe you're on page 42, the net worth summary. Thorn Investigations values my current liquid and fixed assets at $8.2 billion. The number hung in the air, a weapon of mass destruction. Gabby gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She stared at me as if she'd never seen me before. That's impossible, Robert sputtered. This is a fraud. You can't be. Page 43, I continued, my voice steady and clear, cutting through his denial. Lists primary real estate holdings. A 12,000 square foot penthouse at the residences at the Spire. Funny enough, I believe that's your building, Beverly. I'm on the top floor. We must have ridden the same elevator. Also listed are a 50-acre vineyard in Napa Valley, a villa on Lake Como, and the building that houses the Atlanta headquarters of Thorne Investigations, among 27 other commercial and residential properties. Beverly was hyperventilating now, her eyes darting between the report and my face. No. But it's the corporate holdings section that I think you'll find most interesting, I went on, flipping a few more pages. That starts on page 67. It details my 82% ownership stake in Aegis Analytics. It also lists the company's major subsidiaries. Perhaps you've heard of one of them, a smaller tech infrastructure company called FinSecure. Beverly's head snapped up. The name was a lightning bolt. Her entire professional reputation was built on the work her division did at Sterling Financial, and their entire digital platform, their security, their data management, was run by FinSecure. FinSecure, I said, letting the name hang in the air, is the primary technology contractor for Sterling Financial Group. They hold a 12-year contract worth approximately $50 million annually. A contract that is, I believe, up for renewal next month. A renewal that requires my personal signature. The collapse was total. Beverly dropped the report as if it had burned her. The pages scattered across the floor. Julian stumbled back and sank into his chair, his face ashen. Robert looked like he was going to be sick. You, Beverly whispered, her voice a ragged gasp. You work for... Sterling Financial is your client? Not quite, I corrected her gently. Sterling Financial is a client of my subsidiary, which in essence means that you, your husband who consults for the board, and your son, who works under you, all indirectly work for me. We're about to reach the moment you've been waiting for. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with someone who needs to see karma in action. Because what Marcus does next, Beverly never saw it coming. I let the devastating truth settle into the corners of the opulent room. The silence was no longer tense. It was shattered. All that was left was the ringing in their ears. Beverly stared at the scattered pages on her expensive rug, pages filled with a reality her mind simply refused to accept. She had commissioned a weapon to destroy me, and it had turned in her hand, revealing itself to be a mirror. Finally, she found her voice, a thin, reedy thing I'd never heard from her before. Why? She asked, looking at me with a horror that was slowly being replaced by a desperate, dawning comprehension. Why would you hide all of this? Why would you let me treat you like that? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, my gaze unflinching. That's the real question, isn't it? I didn't hide it to trick you, Beverly. I hid it to find something real. I wanted a partner who loved me, not my bank account. And I found that in your daughter. I turned to look at Gabby, whose face was a storm of tears, shock, and a flicker of something else, understanding. But I also needed to know what kind of family I was marrying into. For 3 years, you've made your opinion of me perfectly clear. You called me a burden, a charity case, a failure. You judged me on the car I drove and the apartment I lived in. You never once asked about my character, my passions, my mind. You never tried to know me. I stood up and walked over to the coffee table, calmly gathering the scattered pages of her report. I stacked them neatly and placed them back in front of her. You demanded a background check because you believe a person's worth is measured by their wealth and status, I said, my voice low but carrying to every corner of the room. So I gave you what you wanted, the most thorough background check money can buy. You wanted to see my financials? There they are. You wanted to know if I was worthy of your daughter? By your own metric, Beverly, the question is not whether I am worthy of her. The question is whether you are worthy of having me as a son-in-law. The word hung in the air. Worthy. The very standard she had used to beat me down for years. This can't be real, Robert blustered, finally finding his footing. This is some elaborate hoax. Documents can be forged. They can be, I agreed, which is why I brought this. I returned to my briefcase and pulled out a single, thick document. I placed it on the table. This is the current service contract between FinSecure Technologies and Sterling Financial Group. My signature is on page 14, as the authorizing party for FinSecure. Your signature, Beverly, is on page 15, as the receiving party for Sterling. I'm sure you recognize it. She didn't need to look. She knew. The blood drained from her face, leaving a pasty, gray pallor. You see, you've been operating under the assumption that you held all the power, I continued, that you were the gatekeeper. The truth is, I've had the power to affect your entire professional life since the day I met you. I could have had you fired. I could have canceled the contract that your entire division depends on. But I didn't, because I don't operate that way. I wanted to see if you were capable of basic human decency, of treating the man your daughter loves with respect, regardless of his perceived station. You failed that test. Spectacularly. Finally, I turned to the one person whose opinion truly mattered. Gabrielle. She was on her feet now, her tear-streaked face looking from her mother's broken form to me, her eyes filled with 1,000 questions. Gabby, I said, my voice softening. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I kept this from you. I was waiting for the right time, a time when we were away from all this, to tell you everything. I needed to know that you were with me, Marcus Vance, before I introduced you to Marcus Thorne. Your mother forced my hand. So you lied to me, she whispered, the words laced with hurt. I never lied, I corrected gently. I omitted. I lived a simpler life, and every feeling I ever had for you, every moment we shared, was real. This, I gestured around the room at the wealth and power that now suffocated them. This is my work. It's not who I am. You fell in love with who I am, and that's the greatest gift I've ever received. I stepped towards her, closing the distance between us. But now you have a choice. For 3 years, you've stood by silently while your family disrespected me. You apologized in private, but you never defended me in public. I know you love me, but I need to know if you can stand with me. This is your family, their values, their judgment, their cruelty. Is that your world, or is your world with me? You have to choose. It was the cruelest kindness I could offer her, a choice that would define the rest of her life. Her mother, seeing her last bit of leverage slipping away, began to beg. Gabrielle, baby, don't listen to him, Beverly sobbed, a grotesque caricature of maternal concern. He tricked us. He deceived all of us. We're your family. You can't just abandon us. Gabby looked at her mother, truly looked at her, perhaps for the first time. She saw not a powerful matriarch, but a desperate, shallow woman, her power revealed as a house of cards. Then she looked back at me, the man she'd loved when she thought he had nothing, the man who had endured her family's venom with a grace she never understood until this very moment. She walked past her mother, past her father and brother, and stood directly in front of me. She reached out and touched my face, her fingers tracing my jawline. I choose you, she said, her voice clear and strong, cutting through her mother's wails. I always choose you. And I am so sorry I ever made you feel like you had to face them alone. The relief that washed over me was immense. I pulled her into my arms, burying my face in her hair. We had made it. We were on the other side. Over her shoulder, I met Beverly's gaze. The fight was gone. All that remained was raw, unfiltered terror. "So what happens now?" Robert asked, his voice shaking. "The contract." I pulled back from Gabby, keeping her hand firmly in mine. "The contract will be up for review, as scheduled. But my team and I will be meeting with a new senior vice president. Beverly, you will be offered a generous early retirement package. It's the most dignified exit I can offer. I suggest you take it." "Julian," I said, turning to him, "your position is safe, for now. Your performance will be reviewed on its merits, not your connections. I expect you to act professionally." I looked at all of them, a family unit shattered by its own hubris. "I didn't do this for revenge," I said, my voice devoid of malice. "I did this because your matriarch demanded the truth. This is the truth. What you do with it is up to you. You have 30 days to vacate your positions of contact regarding my accounts. My lawyers will be in touch." With that, Gabby and I turned and walked out of the grand living room, leaving the wreckage of their arrogance behind us. The sound of Beverly's weeping followed us all the way to the door. If this story reminded you that you should never judge someone by appearances and that karma always finds a way, hit subscribe and leave a comment below. What would you have done in Marcus's position? I read every comment. Now let's see how their story ends. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of our penthouse, the one 2 floors above where Beverly used to live. The Atlanta skyline glittered before us, a tapestry of 1,000,000 lights, 1,000,000 stories. The night air was cool and crisp. Gabby came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist and resting her head on my back. "What are you thinking about?" she murmured. "About how different things are," I said, covering her hands with mine. The aftermath of the revelation had been swift and decisive. Beverly had taken the retirement package, disappearing from the corporate world she had worshipped for so long. She and Robert sold their house, the mortgage payments suddenly unmanageable without her exorbitant salary, and moved to a smaller condo across town. Her social circle, built on the shifting sands of power and influence, had evaporated overnight. She was a ghost at the clubs and charities she once ruled. We hadn't seen her since that day. Julian, to my surprise, had risen to the occasion. Stripped of his mother's protection, he had to actually work for a living. He was competent, and once he realized his job depended on merit, he became a surprisingly diligent employee. Our relationship was professional, strictly business, but the sycophantic sneer was gone, replaced by a grudging, fearful respect. The most profound change, however, was in Gabby. The choice she made that day had been a liberation. We started couples therapy the next week, not because our relationship was in trouble, but because we wanted to build the strongest foundation possible. She unpacked a lifetime of emotional conditioning, of seeking her mother's approval. She learned to separate her mother's values from her own. She found her voice, not just for me, but for herself. She was stronger, more confident, more radiant than I had ever seen her. Our wedding was 3 months later. It wasn't the grand society affair Beverly had dreamed of. It was an intimate ceremony at our vineyard in Napa, with 50 of our closest friends and family. My family. The family I had built for myself over the years, and the few relatives on Gabby's side who had always treated me with kindness. Her father and brother were invited. They came, they were civil, and they left early. Beverly was not invited. Gabby wrote her a letter, explaining her decision, and received no reply. "I still feel guilty sometimes," Gabby said quietly from behind me, as if reading my thoughts. "For not seeing it. For not standing up for you." I turned in her arms to face her, cupping her cheek. The city lights danced in her eyes. "You were conditioned to survive in her world," I said. "But when it mattered most, when you had to make a choice, you chose us. You chose a world built on love, not on a ledger. That's all that matters." She leaned in and kissed me, a kiss filled with the quiet comfort of a love that had been tested by fire and had emerged not scarred, but forged. My life was no longer a secret. The world knew who Marcus Thorne was now. There were articles, interviews, the usual circus that comes with wealth. But it didn't matter. Because the one person I needed to see me, truly see me, had already done so when she thought I was just a freelance data analyst with a sensible car. Beverly had demanded a background check to find out if I was good enough for her daughter. She spent a fortune to dig into my past, to quantify my worth in dollars and cents. What she never understood, and what she was now forced to live with, was the simple truth that she had been asking the wrong question all along. The question was never whether I was good enough for her family. It was whether her family was good enough for me. And for the woman I love, we would build our own family. A new legacy, one founded not on the shallow bedrock of status, but on the unshakable foundation of respect. That was the only background check that ever truly mattered.